Yes, I have a note sheet in front of me. I'm dyslexic and dyscalculus, and I know I'm going to forget some of the numbers that I have written down. Welcome to Whiskey and Wine, where we dive into the worlds of whiskey and wine and just make everything a little bit more accessible and a little bit more approachable for more people. Let's go. So, today we're going to be talking about whiskey in general and just starting a very broad overview of the world of whiskey because there's a lot to go through, and we're just going to start really, really basic right now. So, diving right in, what is whiskey? In general, the word whiskey just means a distilled spirit made from grain that is stored typically in barrels. That is the bare minimum. That's what whiskey is defined as. Now, obviously, once you get into the different categories of looking at rye whiskey or American whiskey, Scotch, Irish whiskey, anything like that, yes, there's going to be a lot of nuances. But in general, that's what we're looking at. So the word whiskey kind of has a fun little origin story. First comes from a Latin word, aquavitae, which basically just translates to water of vitality or water of life, which then the Gaelic word comes from that, uskaver. Might be pronouncing that wrong, probably am. You can look it up, get the exact spelling. But that word also means water of life, and that's where the original word whiskey likely comes from. Now, whiskey started, we know, in the British Isles. We're not sure 100% if it was Ireland or Scotland. Doesn't matter. We start in the British Isles, and then we start seeing people blending this and exporting it, and more people become interested. And there's new legislation, and then there's more distilleries popping up. There's distilleries getting shut down because of different reasons. And each time something new is getting done, we see a new push and a new interest in whiskey. And one of those new things, since there was already Irish and Scottish, now we get American, you get rye, you get bourbon. And that is a whole new field that's coming into play. And you're going to see some more ebb and flow, especially as, again, interest comes up, it goes down. Is that due to a war? Is that due to prohibition? Is that due to any tariffs or taxes that were going on? You're going to see that ebb and flow. But each time something new is done, you're going to see people get a little bit more interested. So things from single malt instead of blending. When you're going to see, again, bourbon, you're going to see craft, different things like that. And now you're seeing finishing whiskey and you're seeing American single malt. Those things push an interest in whiskey, which help the craft and the beverage stay alive. And that's a very brief history of how whiskey started, and then just boom, it's everywhere. So when you go to a bar or restaurant and you're going to order some whiskey, you're going to see most likely a couple different styles. And the main styles are going to be American, Irish, Scottish, and Japanese. So let's dive into those four real quick. So when we're talking American, I mean bourbon right now. There's a legal definition for what bourbon can be. Bourbon has to be made in the USA. It cannot be distilled any higher than 160 proof. Can't go into the barrel any higher than 125 proof. It has to go into a new charred American oak barrel. It cannot have anything else added to it besides water. And it has to be at least 51% corn. You do those things, you're bourbon. You deviate anyway, you're no longer a bourbon, technically. Now, there are some that finish or do other things that still have bourbon on the label, but there's a little bit more to it. We'll get into that later. Next big one is going to be Irish whiskey. So for Irish whiskey, you're looking at, must be produced in Ireland. It is made from cereal grain. It is distilled no higher than 189.6. It goes into a wooden cask that is no bigger than 185 gallons or 700 liters for at least 3 years. And it is free from all other substances except for caramel coloring. So they can put caramel coloring in, bourbon can't. Now, jumping over to Scotch, you're going to see something very, very similar. So with Scotch, must be made and aged in Scotland. Use the cereal grains. They use the enzymes from the barley. 189.6 max distillation. Wooden cask no bigger than 700 liters. And completely free of anything else except for that caramel coloring. So you see how they're very similar, but there's going to be some differences as well. Now, the last one is kind of fun because it's Japanese whiskey. Scotch, Irish whiskey, and bourbon all have legal definitions. Japanese whiskey technically doesn't have a legal definition, but in practice, they follow exactly what Scotch is doing. There's an association that's over the main distilleries and distributors of Japanese whiskey. And to be a part of that and to call your product whiskey, you have to abide by these rules, which is, like I said, the same as Scotch, but Japanese. So it has to be made and aged in Japan. And I believe they also have to have Japanese oak, is what they have to use. So those are the main styles you're going to see. Obviously, there's other ones where there's like rye, wheated whiskey, different single malts, Swedish whiskey, Australian whiskey. There's a lot of different whiskeys, but overall, that's just what we're going to go over right now. So now you know what is there. Let's talk about how you get to enjoy your whiskey. So there's going to be three main ways you can enjoy your whiskey. So first one we're going to talk about is neat. Typically, if someone says they're going to have their whiskey neat, it means it's going to be in a glass kind of like this. This one is a Glencairn. Basically, it's got that wider base to it, more narrow at the top. It helps you just kind of get the smell of the whiskey a little bit more, which is honestly a big part of how you can enjoy whiskey because the smell is just amazing. But that's really what neat is. It's going to be in something like that, or it's going to be in a tumbler with just a little bit of whiskey in the bottom and nothing else added. Neat is by itself. Next one is going to be on the rocks. On the rocks just means that you're going to have your tumbler or whatever glass you have, and there's going to be ice in there. Ice is your rocks. Now, is that going to be a fancy glass, fancy ice, just some ice from your freezer? Depends on where you are. You can get into that a little bit later, but really just depends on where you're at, but it's just going to be on ice. And then the last way to enjoy your whiskey is in a cocktail. And if it's in a cocktail, just enjoy it. You're not going to get as much of that whiskey flavor, but it's a good introductory to whiskey. That's how I got introduced. It was having I don't care for this. It was having a Wisconsin Old Fashioned. I know a lot of people hate the Wisconsin Old Fashioned, but that's what I had first. And that was my gateway into learning about whiskey and enjoying whiskey. But there are so many different cocktails. There's a whiskey smash. There's a whiskey sour, Manhattan, Sazerac, endless options. And if that's how you choose to enjoy your whiskey or introduce someone to whiskey, that's fine. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you need to have whiskey a certain way. The best whiskey is whatever whiskey you like, however you like to enjoy it. That's it. Don't crap on anyone else for it. Don't let anybody crap on you. Enough said there. But my whole goal here is to help you understand a little bit more of what's in your glass so that you can appreciate it a little bit more. Just like a painter, if you understand what they went through to make that painting, you are going to appreciate that painting a little bit more. Same goes for the whiskey. That's my goal, is just to help you understand that a little bit more so you can enjoy your beverage a little bit more. But as always, I'm glad you're here. I hope you learned something, and I hope you stick around. Cheers.